Vuyo Mhaga is the Gauteng Provincial Chief Director of Communications and joins us now for this conversation. A very good evening to Mr. Mhaga. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Is there a broader plan, just as we're talking about a just transition and green energy and the loans that government is getting to facilitate this? Is there a strategy for Gauteng that could be in the near future implementable?
No, thank you very much for having me. So good evening to you. Indeed, there is a strategy. If you go back to SOPA of this year, the state of the province that the Premier delivered, he had already budgeted about 1.2 billion aside to really respond to the issue of the energy crisis in Gauteng. And obviously, upon having a conversation with the residents of Gauteng, we then understood that areas like Swaneville, Zola, that some of them were visited. If you go to Pretoria, Garankuwa, and some of the areas in Sidibeng have been actually outside the electricity. So they have not necessarily been affected by load shedding, but they've been in load shedding for long. So that has actually prompted the Premier to have a conversation with Eskom as well as City Power as the implementing agency. So that program that has been actually an ongoing conversation started initially last week to make sure that we then start to bring those people who have been outside power for long. But that is not the only one, but it's also to engage communities to migrate to smart meters, as well as to make sure that they join the provincial government and the local government to fight illegal connection. At least by doing, we're hoping by the end of this year, majority of Gauteng residents will have migrated to smart meter.
But I'm just wondering, how does that bring people along, especially those residents who are complaining that they can no longer afford some of the alternative energy sources such as gas because of the expense? Are there going to be incentives, subsidies that the Gauteng government is planning?
Yeah, remember, so really, it's really on our part from the Gauteng government, it's not necessarily a direct mandate, but we cannot then say on the basis that electricity is not the mandate of a provincial government, so we must do nothing. That's why the Premier said, using the provincial resources, let's bring in the municipality, let's bring Eskom, and actually let's negotiate with the city of Johannesburg to actually give us City Power as the implementing agency across Gauteng, to make sure at least we go to those communities and make sure that we put, the transformers and all that, because we've got an appreciation that the current alternative use of energy that they are using, it might be actually much more expensive than the current one that everyone basically uses in the province.
It may not be a direct mandate, but you would agree with me it's a constitutional mandate. It is also a mandate taken on by the government and the party if we're talking about your developmental agenda. So I'd imagine that you do have a bigger plan, because the access to a quality life, which does also a basic needs that are being met by government, also does include electricity, given the fact that we've seen that load shedding has impacted on people's safety and quality of life. Businesses are shutting down because of that, so that's also impacting your job development strategy. So what is the wider plan?
No, so you'll remember that the provincial government is already have taken about 6,000 young people to go and train as installers for the solar. So it's a very much more broader than only the short-term aspect of the people that are outside, because they don't have transformers and all that. But to look at the broader problem of load shedding and the migration to the greener energy, the Gauteng government, through the MSETA, have actually currently, as I'm speaking to you, a lot of those young people are actually at the universities and some of the institutions to train them to make sure that they come back and actually assist us to migrate a lot of people to the green energy. So this is just not only a stop shop to respond to the current problem of transformers to those communities, but to say at a broader level, what can then we do? As I've said, the mandate literally resides at the national government as well as at the local government, but we could not sit idling around it. That's why the Premier said, we actually, as a provincial government, setting aside 1.2 billion to respond to the issue of the energy challenge that is facing the country. Purely because we've got an appreciation of the role that Gauteng does in the economy. We contribute about 33% of the South Africa's GDP, and majority of the manufacturing and the industries are located in Gauteng. So we can't sit idle. So that's why we've then said, let's partner with relevant institutions to make sure that we've got a broader energy response plan. But as we do that, we must also appreciate that there are people who actually have been out of electricity for long, and we must not leave anyone behind. That's why then the Premier said, let's also respond to those communities that have been out of electricity, but that does not necessarily mean that we negate the broader plan. The broader plan still remains. That's why we have sent many of those young people to go and get trained and get accredited to use the alternative energy that everyone is speaking about in terms of migration from fossil fuel to the green energy.
Speaking of partnerships, it's the Premier himself who says he's set a target for December to replace the damaged transformers, but it's actually Eskom that maintains the transformers and the mini substations. So is he taking the responsibility from Eskom?
No, that's what I was saying. We are working with Eskom, but what we have done is that we have then signed a memorandum of agreement with the City Power, which is an entity of Johannesburg, to be our implementing agency. So to say, you've got literally about two implementing agencies. You've got Eskom and you've got the City Power. As soon as we go to the budget council to make sure that we then actually capacitate City Power, we're then going to accelerate the work. So we're not necessarily actually taking over Eskom, but we're actually supplementing the work that they've been actually already doing in communities. But we need that work to be accelerated. Hence, we're then bringing an institution like City Power to augment the work that has already been done by Eskom.
All right. So from a law enforcement perspective, there's the issue of illegal connections, but also stolen cables that are leading to people being in the dark, even though they are paying for electricity. And we spoke about that court case earlier on. What is the strategy there?
No, that's what I was saying. There are two issues. One, of course, the communities must take ownership of it. Because it is their infrastructure, it is them who get affected by it. But you'll remember that by May this year, we'll have trained about 6,000 young people to respond on the issues of crime. We have added that number by 2,136. So we are talking about 8,000 additional boots on the ground. Part of it is that there will be specific number of those young people that must make sure that they patrol strategic areas where the energy is located. But that does not necessarily negate communities to really take care of their own infrastructure, because this is not a government infrastructure. It is their taxpayers' money. So it is upon them also to make sure that they work in collaboration with the crime prevention wardens as well as the police. We will do that on our part to deploy those crime wardens to actually make sure that they protect those, the infrastructure that will be installing, so that we don't reverse the situation. We continue to go back to those communities because there's an illegal connectivity that we're talking about.
Well, thank you so much, DA, for speaking to us. Vuyo Mhaga, who is with the Gauteng Provincial Government.